Welcome to APCUG's Saturday Safari, where we travel the vine-covered paths of technology, searching for the golden tech answer. Today, we're actually doing a presentation that was delayed through technical difficulties from last month. Come a few months from now, Windows 10 people will be having to make some decisions about what their future is going to be with Windows 10. We will be giving presentations throughout the next few months about options and what can be done and what can't be done and whatever. One of the options of taking a machine that cannot, you have no option to go to Windows 11 because your machine is not new enough for Windows, but it's still a good machine and it still works pretty fine. That one option you have is moving to the Linux operating system. We get a lot of questions during our Linux workshops that we've been doing. And today I want to do sort of a Linux for beginners from the beginning and present some information regarding questions that we have gotten that I can hopefully answer. I won't be covering everything in Linux because we've been having workshops about every month since 2020 October, but I'm going to give some beginnings, help answer some general questions. Afterwards, we might have time to share some additional beginners' questions. And then in our next few months, we will be doing some more workshops, trying to help new users or people interested in finding out more to help make a good decision of what to do. So today is going to be kind of a beginning of the path. And then hopefully in the next few months, we will continue down that path. I will be working on a couple different computers, so hopefully I will click the right mouses. There we go. Before I go to a different screen, I've got to make sure everything is gone from this one. One of the very first questions that usually is brought up to Linux people is, what is Linux like? They want to know, what's it look like? And I've got a simple answer. It looks just like Windows. It has toolbars, icons, windows. Looks just like Microsoft Windows, sort of. Then they say, well, how do you work it? You know, how do you do Linux? And I have another simple answer. Just like Windows. We have a mouse, keyboard, we click icons, we type things, just like Windows. Well, don't you have to learn a lot of things to be able to do Linux? My answer is, if you know how to use Windows, you pretty much know how to use Linux. It's that simple. And then we always get this comment, show me. So I'm going to be glad to show you. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take a short tour of Linux Mint Cinnamon. This is just one version of Linux and one model of Linux Mint. And so we're going to take a look at Linux Mint. And as you see, this looks very similar to what you would have with your Windows computer when you had a screensaver going. Mine has a clock on it, so I like that so that when I'm working not on the computer, I still know what time it is in big letters. And so I'm going to log in just like we do on Windows. And then I'm going to do one thing because this is a virtual machine because I wanted to have a clean. So I'm going to hide my, what I call panels, so that you see a complete picture of what I want you to see. One of the things that we like, that those of us who recommend Linux Mint, is that it has a real helpful sequence of activities that a new user should do. Because a lot of times people will ask, well, okay, what do I do now? And so Linux Mint has that with their what they call first steps. And it goes through different things to get yourself up and going, such as picking the colors that you want to use on the computer, creating a system snapshot, which we'll talk about more in other things, checking the drivers that you might need for your apparatuses, making sure your computer is up to date. And then it says, let's go visit the settings so you can find out what things you can change. That would be similar to the control panel in Windows. And then to go visit the software store and see all the software that we can have. And then if you want to, we don't always have by default the firewall on, not necessary, but you can go ahead and turn it on and set it up. And this one pops up each time until you don't need it. But let's take a look at a very standard looking Linux. The question says, what does it look like? Well, it sure looks a lot like Windows. If you look in the bottom right-hand corner, I see a clock. I see an indicator for my laptop battery. If you have a desktop, you wouldn't see that. I have my volume control. I have my network connection is up and running. I even have access to removable drives that I might plug in. And I've got to notice that I've got some updates. And that's the same thing that Windows people see. There will be a pop-up that says there's updates to do. If we look on the left side of the taskbar that Windows call, most Linux call these panels because we can have more than one. Sometimes it doesn't always do what's a task, so we call them panels. But you can see in the far left-hand corner, I have a button. It's called menu instead of start because we figured out it's kind of silly to have a button called start when you're already started. But we have a menu. I have shortcuts, quick access shortcuts that I can add. And then in the middle of the taskbar panel would be where programs that I'm running would be showing up, just like in Windows. And you can see I have a mouse that works on the screen, and I can do same things. If I do a right click, like you know how to do in Windows, everybody knows that right click is your best friend because that's what's going to tell you what you can do. And just like with Windows, I can change my background, and I have a lot of different choices. Oh, that's kind of a neat one. If I go down to the menu, when I click on it, you'll look and say, oh, wow, this kind of has a look and feel, looks like a kind of a Windows 7 menu. Everybody knows how to do those. In this one, along the left-hand side, there are some shortcuts to some places. There's another link to my files, just like I have down at the bottom. That green folder and that green folder are the same thing. Then, typical with what you would have with Windows, there is a locking your screen. There's a shutdown and a logging off, just like you do. Now, what might be different than what you're used to in Windows 10 and 11, programs in Linux, a lot of these versions, are in categories. And people like this because if I go to the alphabetical order, which I can do by going to all, which is what most people see in Windows, there are times that when I look at a name, I maybe don't know what that program does if it doesn't tell. Now, in my system, it tells me down at the bottom what generally this program is going to do. So all I have to do is go to one of the categories, and then there's all of the programs that fit under that category. That's pretty much the same as you work. So if I go to Internet, I get Firefox as the original default program that comes with my Linux, and I can just click on Firefox just like you would on your Windows menu, and up pops Firefox just like it would for you. So I don't have to learn anything special to do internet browsing on Linux that I already didn't know how to do on Windows. And up in the top corner, just like we're used to, we have the same buttons for minimize, maximize, and close. I can close that out. If I go to Office, here are all of the different productivity tools: word processor, presenter, spreadsheet, drawing program. So everything that I'm used to doing in Windows, because I was a LibreOffice user from way, way back. And again, I open it up and it's the same LibreOffice writer that I did with Windows. So I just do what I normally do. What might change is that in Linux, each of these versions, the people who produce these kind of have their favorites. So for example, if I go to sound and video, VLC originally was not there. I forgot to get rid of it last night after I did my other presentation. Rhythmbox is the program to listen to music, and Celluloid is the program to use for video. Work very well. However, I was a big VLC user in my Windows days, and so all I did was add VLC, and now I'm back to doing the exact same things with Linux that I was doing with Windows. Windows also is good that it separates in your settings the difference between administrative settings that require a password to run the program that's going to make changes, and all the personal preferences that you can do to make your computer work better for you. My goal and Linux goal is that the computer works for you, not you for it. So let's go to that control panel. And this particular version has quite a large selection of tools that you can use to adjust how things work in your computer. We'll save that for another workshop because that could be almost a whole presentation of all of your settings and what all you can do. But everything that you can probably do in Windows or more have settings in your Linux to do the same things. I mentioned that we went and I got the VLC program to add to mine. You can go to a software managing program, and this might take a second for it to load. Has to check to see if there's anything new been added. And we have a huge selection of programs by categories. And you can just see that there are some recommended ones. Audacity, of course, for the most top-rated one for audio editing and such. They have a list of featured ones. And then we can go down to the categories. So if you're looking for something, let's say I'm looking for internet, because I want another browser besides Firefox. And so I can come here and scroll through the programs. Now, there's sometimes tons and tons of programs, so you might want to do a search. And I like CHROMIUM, and I like Chromium. Did I spell that wrong? Yes, I did. And so I can add the Chromium browser to my list of internet activities. And there's, like I said, we could spend another whole partial presentation on just talking about all the software that's available. But that's what's here in a very easy. They also have some of the top rated ones that are out there in terms of if you wondered what to do. There's the Bitwarden that workshops who have been out, we've been doing a lot on. Just like Microsoft has their Microsoft store, the Linux has a software store. And the big difference is that you probably won't find anything in the Linux software store that costs you any money. If I click on the file manager, they have different names, like cars have different names. But for the most part, it works the same way. This one opens up to what Windows users know as users and your home. We call this our home directory. And that has all of the folders that you're used to having in a Windows. It's all still there. And on the side, I can have shortcuts to get to any of those folders that we have. So that isn't making it anything different for a Windows user, because documents, downloads, music, pictures, and videos, public one, all the same along with desktop. So there's nothing different. There's a lot of extra features that come with Linux that what makes it a little easier to work with some things, but there's the same thing. In Linux, if you click on the time, you also get a calendar. And as you can see, I've got some items in the calendar because this calendar hooks to my Google Calendar, or it might hook to your Outlook calendar. And so it just automatically comes in. Today I've got the workshop right now, and then afterwards we've got a friend whose child is graduating from high school, so we're going to stop by there. And so I can take and open up the calendar, the separate calendar program, add things to it, but it's there. Can't think of anything much different. Again, if you do your right clicking, because on right clicking, we can do all sorts of additions and things to the panel. When I do go to menu, things work very easy. If I do a right click, remember, right click your best friend, I can easily add this to my panel. And then now in my quick links, I have my quick link to VLC. So as my slide said, in order to do this, we're using the same kinds of things with my Windows and that, mouse and keyboard, and everything I'm doing, I did with Windows. So really, to me, there's really not much of a learning curve that goes with that. So we can answer some other questions later about that. Put them in the chat box to Judy. And if I want to shut down, just like with Windows, I have a choice of shutting down or restarting, putting it to sleep, or oops, I didn't want to do that. So I'm going to just cancel that. And we'll leave this so that we can move on. So that was our short tour of the version called Linux Mint. That's the Cinnamon model, I guess I can call it that. So now you've seen it. So one of the next questions that usually pops up, well, where do I get Linux? Where will I have to do? Questions, please go to Judy. All right. It used to be, when I first started in Linux many, many years ago, we had Linux magazines of different brands. And Linux came to us in the magazine on a floppy disk. Sometimes it was a floppy disk that was attached inside the magazine, but sometimes that, I guess, may have been too much money to do with production. So they just started slipping it in and then bagging the magazine, so they didn't have to add an insert or something. And it was really great. I had subscribed to a magazine back then, a long time ago, that was sort of a quarterly, as far as I remember, it was a quarterly magazine. And twice a year, there was a new version of Linux. And so in this example, I got a magazine in January, April, July, October. The April magazine came with a new Linux, and the October one came with a new version. So it came to me, or I could go to the store and buy it. Well, that doesn't really work as much now because there are very few print magazines still out there, and they don't usually include the free floppy disk. The other way you can get Linux is from the distributor. Go and get a copy from them, which is the way most people do it now, because now we have the big fast internet. Now, each distributor usually had their own websites that you went to, like their own stores. So that's nothing big. If you want something from the meat store, you went to the meat store, the butcher. Like the cars, the manufacturers have their own, or like a car manufacturer, it had its own dealership. So all of these Linux distributors had their own websites. The problem was that you had to make sure that you found the true site. As we all know, on internet, it's a dangerous world out there, and you've got to know exactly what you're typing. And as an example, here are 3 Linux distributors: Ubuntu, Mint, Fedora. And if you notice, there's no consistency in their web address. Ubuntu, it makes sense, ubuntu.com, but no www. And you go to their download page. Well, with Mint, it does have www, but they go to a download.php. And then there's Fedora, back to no www, but it's fedoraproject.org workstation, because you're going to download what they call a workstation, which is the regular version for a computer. So you really have to know where you're going, or you might download something that might be bad. So what's the better way? The better way is going to a website that's kind of like the warehouse of all Linux distribution, called DistroWatch. And they list everything. That also includes weekly Linux news and reviews. So it's a good website, even if you're not looking for a distribution, to get news and what's going on. It'll have short reviews about every version. So that's good, so that if you're trying to figure out which one. We do the same thing when you're dealing with cars. You go to the car, such as like, the car reports or whatever, and you read their unbiased reviews of cars, trying to decide which version of a car you want to get. Well, we do that same thing with Linux. Windows people aren't used to that, because there is only one version of Windows, and so there's no other choice. So you don't need to be going out and reading reviews and deciding which one's going to be the best for you. The big thing is they give you the links directly to the download, so that you're not trying to type in something and type it wrong and get redirected to a bad place. It has it right there. The location that will be in the follow-up slides is distrowatch.com. And I'm just going to take you to slideshows, because you never know what's going to happen on the internet and whatever. So here is distrowatch.com. It is a huge site. And again, this is something we could take a mini presentation on, all the things that it can do. I just learned last week at the Columbus Linux SIG something new that you could do with DistroWatch that I didn't even know. So it's always learning. But you can see that every week they have the news and reports and whatever. I used to be able to get on their RSS feed, but I'm not working right to get it sent to me. Okay. Why are we dumping back? As you look down the page, you can see on the left-hand side, there are latest headlines. Down the middle, there are lots of reviews and news. And then on the right-hand side, they have a list of a lot of different versions of Linux. They have a list of 100. It would like being in the car world, the list of 100 different makes and models of cars and links to their sites. When you go to DistroWatch, I'd tell you, don't pay that a close attention to the ranking, because if you don't know enough, you would think that, oh, Linux Mint is the #1 Linux version. Well, that's not true. This website tracks how many people go check out the different Linux versions. And a lot of people have been checking out Mint, so that's why they're at the top. MX Linux was listed as number 2 because they must have done something recently that a lot of people are going checking out to see what's up, what's new and what's going on. So they have a lot of people visiting and hits, so they're number 2. Probably number 8 is probably the most used Linux, Ubuntu, who's a Linux version backed by a big multi-million-dollar South African. But it's listed down the bottom because Mint has 3 different models, all coming from the same website. Whereas Ubuntu has 7 different models, but each model has a separate website. So if you would combine number 8, which is Ubuntu, number 32, which is Kubuntu, and on down the list, if you would add all of those Buntus together, they would probably be ranked at the top. So all I tell you to do about this list, you can see who's checking on what, but find the one you're interested in. For example, I'm going to pick the MX Linux version. And then that takes us to that particular website. They give us a lot of information about this particular version of Linux. A lot of specifics about its design, where it came from. If you scroll on down, you'll see that there's a whole section of reviews if you want to go read other people's reviews. And then what's great for me, so I don't have to type something wrong or whatever, they give you the link to the downloads. And so when I click on that link, it takes me to MX Linux and their download. And there are their 3 models. One's called XFCE, one's called KDE, and one's called Fluxbox. And we'll talk more about what those different models, names, and what they mean. But I'm going to pick the Fluxbox one that is a 64-bit. And notice that it also has a 32-bit. This is important to know that there are a lot of Linux versions that will even run on old 32-bit computers that haven't been made in a long time. So I click on the Fluxbox one, and then based on your particular browser, you can see up at the top here that the arrow's pointing that there's a download icon for the browser, and it's almost done. And then after it's downloads, it'll be in my downloads folder. It'll be an ISO file, and we'll tell you about what to do with that later. But, that's how easy it is to get it now. I say go to Distro Watch and get your Linux, and then we'll tell you what to do with it. So the last part of this first half of the presentation is talking about, well, then how do you try Linux? Well, if you want to test out a car, you go to the dealership and you tell a salesman you want to try it out. And I've heard stories that usually what they'll do is they'll take your car keys away from you so that they keep your car while you take their car. Or the salesman will hop in the car with you and then go drive around so you can check it out. Well, luckily with Linux, there's nobody going to be hanging around pressuring you and whatever. It's free to use and free to try out as many as you want. Because I know that there are times that if you go to a car dealership and you get to try more than 1 or 2 cars, salesman gets kind of antsy about that because they want you to focus on one car so they can do the sale for that. With Linux, nobody really cares. You can look and try and see however many you want. So what is the best way to try out Linux? Well, my answer is find a Linux user. Maybe you have a Linux user in your own club right now, or ask somebody in your club if they know a Linux user, and then find out why they aren't a member of your club. Because if you find a Linux user, you can get them to let you take a test drive. You can sit beside them, ask a lot of questions, and let you give it a try, and you can see it in operation, like I was showing you earlier. Only you can do more specific things. So that's a good way. And I can tell you that the Linux users are more than pleased to be able to show off Linux and help you learn about Linux. So find a Linux user, and then you're on your way. The other way to do it is the follow-up from what we did on the last section, where you went and got a copy of a Linux version. We went and got that version of MX Linux. That was the flat hub. So once you have that, download it. And again, I recommend, for your safety on the internet, use a program like DistroWatch that will take you right to the exact location of the good, safe download. And then what you're going to do is create what we call a live USB. And the two programs that we kind of tell Windows people to use would be Rufus or Ventoy. And then once you create that live USB, you boot that up to your current computer. And then you test out how well Linux works on your hardware and see how it runs. Because that's what it's doing. That thumb drive, when you boot to it, is using all of the hardware inside that case, whether it's a desktop or laptop, and you'll know exactly how well it runs. And we have a lot of people who are very surprised when they take an older running Windows computer, pop in a Linux live USB, and find out that that computer that they thought was getting too old to run is running just fine on a Linux operating system. Now, this is stuff we'll talk about in a future presentation too, about how to use the Rufus and Ventoy program to create these live USBs. However, we now have an easier way, thanks to some developers who put together a website. We used to have one that went defunct because the people who did it must have gotten tired or off to something else. But we have a way, thanks to some people who have shared this with me and us on our Linux. And this is where you can take a spin on a version of Linux just in your browser. You don't have to download anything. You don't have to create anything. Now, I will say that it probably doesn't work as spiffy as if it was on your hardware without your Windows running. But you can check out without doing any extra work. The place is called DistroSea, S-E-A, like an ocean of fish. Here's what it looks like. I'm not going to jump onto it live because sometimes there's a backlog, people waiting. And they have listed a ton of different Linux versions. And why we have different Linux versions, we will talk about maybe in another presentation. But suffice to say, it's the same reason we have all those different makes and models of cars. You answered the question to me, why are there so many versions of cars? And you've answered the same question to why are there so many Linux. So if you go down that list, they'll even tell you which ones are the popular ones, such as Linux Mint, the one that I demonstrated. OpenSUSE is another popular one, and you'll find that. But there's that same MX Linux that I like. My only concern about MX Linux is it's a small development team, and they're still here now and been working hard, but you never know what might happen to a small team compared to some of the other big ones. So I click on it. This is nice because it not only gives me the 3 models, the XFCE KDE Fluxbox, but it can go back a couple of different versions for whatever reason. So you select the one you want on, we're still in the web browser, and then it will let you know if that version on their website is being used and how many people are waiting in line. So if you don't want to wait however many there are, you can say, okay, I'll just go back and I'll try something else out. But here, there was nobody ahead of me finally. And so I verified that I was a human. And then it tells you about it. And then it says a session is running for you. You're not loading it. You're just going to their computer server somewhere, and you are accessing a running version of MX Fluxbox, such as this. So I haven't had to do anything other than go to a website, but within this website, I can actively try out this distro. And you can see here, I did a right click, and this particular version of a model called Fluxbox is a lot of mouse driven. So you can see right click, I get the main menu, and whoops, that was my menu. Left click, then you can just click down through menus. And so there you get all of these testing out. And so you can try them out at your leisure, and there's no salesman sitting there trying to talk you into this one or that one. So now you've been introduced to Linux. You've been shown what it looks like and how easy it is to work it, just like you've been doing. It's just like if you, I tell people moving to Linux is like going to the airport and having to rent a car. You can't get the exact car that you drive, but you get a different car, but you can drive it. You might have to a little bit with the dashboard and something, but basically you get in the car, you start it up, you put it in gear, you steer it, you put your brake on. So same with Linux. We talked about how to get it and how to try it out. And the important thing that I want you to know is you haven't done anything to your computer. In fact, there are people that use the live USB to run Linux all the time. It's not even installed on their computer, and that's for late future. We don't even have to worry about that. And so you've seen it. It's not going to do anything to your computer. You don't have to worry about doing any kind of damage or what to your computer. So I'm going to take a break from this first half or this presentation, and we're going to go back to Judy. And I'm going to stop the sharing for right now, but I can always come back to share. And we're going to let Judy open things up for beginner questions about Linux and all that sort of stuff. Turn my picture back on.
Okay. It's interesting. People ask questions and then then ignore that. Don't say my question. It's already been answered. So that's good.
Do I still get paid for those questions?
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. And our other John K says, my senior year in college, my frat had 6 residents named John out of 42 total. It would be interesting to look for that particular year if it was obviously the popular name to name your kids, for heaven's sakes. A little bit of trivia there. I want to know why. The panel is not showing on his, that would be John's screen. My menu button doesn't expand like John's did. Any idea why? And never mind, it just fixed itself. I want to know what it did to fix itself.
In Zoom, the Zoom panel comes and goes unless you tell it to be permanently stay put. So when the Zoom panel, your mouse moves on your computer, panel pops up across the bottom.
Okay, thank you. And Cal was vigorously, nodding his head. John, you gave the correct answer. It's always nice to have it verified.
It is. Let me check.
Just for grins. Can you make individual icons bigger along with their text?
I got somebody says I'm not as loud as you are.
I know.
So I'm going to make it louder. That's a Zoom problem.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But how easy is it to do that?
Too easy.
Oh.
You go to fonts and set the font sizes. A lot easier than you can do and have more control than you can in Windows. Because we've always had the problem when we have people sharing windows in the file system, nobody can read the file manager. It's too small. You have to go, I think it was Drew has shared some different file managers that work with Windows that can enlarge font. But in the Linux, you just go to your settings for icons and change the size of them. Go to the fonts, change the size. It's so easy. It's just one of the settings that you do. And you have a lot more control. When we do a customization presentation, I'll easily show that. But yeah, it's just go to icons, set the size. Go to your fonts, set the size. Easy. You're muted. You're muted, Judy.
Yeah.
Okay.
To translate that into my Windows world, I have my font size is 125. I think they ship with 100 as standard, but I like mine bigger, so I'm 125. And this same for, the sound and things like this. And we all have in Windows to go here, there, and everywhere to do all of this stuff. And I'm thinking it's kind of like one-stop shopping, and it's easier to do in Linux.
Yeah. And the other thing too is that I got to clarify on yours that your 100 to 120 is your screen magnification rate. That's magnifying everything. But with the settings, I can set the font for my window titles one size, my this and that, my icons for my desktop icons at a different size. So there's a lot of freedom for individual customization that we can do in Linux. And we can show that in the next.
Because I'd like to see that again. As much as you can show me and touch and feel type stuff, the better off I would be.
That's going to come up. Yep.
Thank you so much. Okay, here we go. I love it. The rest of that was covered up is so we can read them. How true. And everybody would like to know what version of Linux you are using.
I am using what's called Linux Mint, and the model is Cinnamon, which is the desktop that you'll hear more about in the next presentation. But I'm a user of Linux Mint. Okay,
so and then I have an FYI here. I am running 22.1 like John.
Good. That's
what is 22.1?
The version, the model year of the car.
Oh, okay. We got a comment in here. I can't choose a new car either.
No, I can't either, but
but
you can with Linux because there's no tariffs on Linux.
Very good. Very
good. Some distributions do it by the year. So this year would be 25, so it would be 25 point something. Some of them do it by the sequence. Since the first one we did, this is the 22nd one we did. Windows does it their own way with 10 and 11, and then they have subcategory of 22H2, 24H2, which is a subcategory, what we call a point. That's in the next presentation.
Okay, so that means that, or does it mean that if I like what I'm using, one comes up and you go, I really don't like fill in the blank, that I can just skip that?
Yeah.
Like, the problems I'm having now
Right.
with my 10 that you could upgrade to 11, but oops, something inside that won't let me do that anymore.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I'll answer that in the next part.
Okay, thank you. Do all printer drivers work on Linux and you just install them like you normally do?
Clarifying, not all printer drivers work on Windows. So therefore, not all printer drivers will work on Linux. It's whether or not a driver has been developed for Linux. And if you've ever gone to the store to see how many hundreds of different printer models there are, and if you haven't, go online and look at the list. Somebody has to create a driver. And so it depends on whether there's somebody who has created the driver. We have some printers that have no problem with Linux, HPs, Brothers. Then there are some that aren't developed as much, and that's partly the company's choice that they don't have that quite developed. I have used Canon printers on Linux. It wasn't the best, but I found a site overseas that built drivers just for Linux, and it was the best driver. It was better than any driver I had from a Windows driver in terms of what it let me do. Like I said, HP, you'll very rarely have any problems with running an HP. In fact, usually when you install your operating system, it says, hey, you've got a printer connected here, and it's ready to go. But not always, because you got to have that small little print that says not always. But that's the same in Windows. There are, Windows right now has a problem that upgrading, there are going to be printers and scanners and stuff that will not work with Windows 11 and stuff.
Oh, that is such a true statement. Ugh. Do all printer drivers work on Linux? No, not necessarily.
But I have no problem. The Brother that I'm using right now, when I hooked it up, it was ready to go. I did download the special Linux drivers for the scanner part. But then once I did that and installed the Linux drivers for Brother Scanner, it worked fine.
Okay. Can existing PSTs be imported to another mail program?
That's up to the mail programs. If you can export it out, and if the program you want to use, and this is not a Linux question, this is a general question, then if the program you want to use can import PST, then yes. But if the designers of the program have designed their files that they don't want anybody to be using another program, then they will design it so that it can't be exported and imported.
Can Windows and Apple users open documents that you create on Linux?
What am I creating them with? LibreOffice?
Yes, Writer.
And yes, they can open it if their program will open those kinds of files. That's not a Linux question. That is what we will talk about in the next thing. That's cross-platforming, and it's designed, whereas LibreOffice reads all of Microsoft. Previously, Microsoft would not read LibreOffice, but now they realize that they're in the minority, so they've changed it so they can. So it's the program you're using that determines. It's not the operating system. Files are files.
And when we do any of these Saturday safaris or Wednesday workshops, and John sends me the attendee list, it's an ODT file, and I open it up, and hi there, it looks just like Excel to me. And the same thing when I sometimes have too many things that are opened, I will use Writer to keep track of my questions. I print them out. And so I'm using, for all intents and purposes, versions of Linux and struggling with my, Writer and Word and things like that. And it just all goes seamlessly.
Yeah. And Judy likes me when I do these kind of relationships. It's like your cars. Your car is a gasoline car. You should be able to go to any gas station and put the gasoline in your car that runs. But I know people who say, well, if I go to such and such gas station and use their gas, my car doesn't run as well as if I use this station's gas. So we're not talking about the operating system as much as the software that you're using. So we got two different things. Linux is an operating system that lets you use software, and then it's the software that becomes the concern.
When I had one of those huge Ford LTD wagons that, was supposed to be like from back in the day when they had the wood panels and everything, Ford said the best mileage I could ever get, blah, 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 was if I used Union 76. Couldn't prove it by me, but that's the only card that I ever had that said this gas is going to go better. So the only thing I could do was make an assumption that they were, speaking straight scoop, and they weren't shining me on. So I can recommend something for you, and it might be your favorite thing, and it's not, somebody else's favorite thing.
Yeah, and I can tell people, just off of your thing about the spreadsheet, I could send Judy an Excel file if I wanted to, but I don't. So I send her the ODT and she opens it.
No, I don't know any better. Now, if he hadn't said that, I would just make a statement and say, I can do Microsoft Office and I can do Writer files. They're interchangeable. Google Docs are interchangeable. They're all friendly.
Have become friendlier.
Yes, well, that is true. Especially Microsoft has become more friendly. For those of us who could never interpret all the version information, can I please, whoever this is, get a recommended version? I can't sort through car models either. So is this the version that you are showing people what you actually use?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I didn't let you see it because I've customized it quite a bit to make it work for me. As I said, my t-shirt that I have, but I don't wear it today because I'm wearing APCUG, is a t-shirt that says Linux, where computers are supposed to work for you and not you for it. So my computer has been customized, so I control it very easily. So, but I didn't want you to see it because it would be confusing at this point.
And I would just love that because I customize everything that I can possibly do because that's my personality and I want it to work for me, and it might not work the same way for somebody else. So I'm making my own music. Now does it connect to G Drive or OneDrive?
Not a Linux question. G Drive and OneDrive are cloud-based, so you're doing it with a browser, so it's not a Linux question. Not saying I'm being bad, I'm just saying not an issue. It's a cloud-based.
Okay. Is Linux
You can even go on Linux and go to Microsoft's free web office thing and use it because it's web-based.
Got it. Is Linux safe in terms of getting viruses, as many people still click on bad sites?
Okay, getting into the technical part, it's very safe because the viruses that most people create to hit the Windows users are exe files, executable files. Executable files do not run on Linux. So if I get one of those and click on it, nothing's going to happen because it's an exe file and Linux doesn't run those.
So is that why people might say Linux is safer, because you're not going to accidentally download something that you shouldn't?
That's one of the reasons when we future talk about security and stuff.
Okay. Sorry, my brain's going here and there and everywhere based on these questions. Using distro.com to try out a version, will it also let you use an internet browser within the Linux you are trying? And if so, is it safer or less safe or the same as using it on your regular computer? I guess that would be known as your Windows computer.
We'd call that the host. So your host computer is Windows and you are using your Windows browser to access. So how well do you trust your browser and your Windows for clicking on things? Because, you know, when you're running the Linux on theirs, it would be kind of safe. But if you would bring it to, you know, your computer, then you got another question.
There's one for you. What versions of Linux run Zoom?
Every.
Dad, you know how hard that was now, John.
Yeah.
To try to get Zoom. John was given that project to hit Zoom over their head every once in a while and say, don't forget, we have Linux people here.
Yeah. When you go to the Zoom's download page, it'll ask you what, I don't want to say an extra word, but what brand of Linux, because there are like three main. Think of it as gas, electric, and diesel. And then you just select the one that you need to use and download that version of the Linux client.
Okay. Can you add a user without them having to have a password? A guest or a visitor user?
Of course. Can you do that in Windows?
Yep.
Yep.
Will I have to convert my Microsoft Word documents and Excel spreadsheets when I get Linux? Are they interchangeable? Yes.
As Judy said, you don't have to convert anything. You can just open them and work on them and save them as an Excel file or a Word doc file. Or if you've decided you're going to stick with LibreOffice, save them as the open document format and then use it from there. I did this a lot. I taught in a building that was a Windows building. And so in school, I would open up a file in LibreOffice, although back then it was StarOffice, and create a document, somehow get it home, open it up in my LibreOffice, make whatever changes, save it, take it back to school, and then use it however I needed to use it.
I could easily use Writer. I use their version of Excel with absolutely no problem. It's just, what are they talking about under data? You got a whole laundry list of things in Writer that go with writer. And it doesn't quite match what we've done for years with Word, but it does all the same stuff. It's just kind of in a different location.
It can't be copy, otherwise it would look identical, be copyright. But
Yeah.
even though this isn't a Linux thing, but it was interesting that years ago, LibreOffice could open up older formats of Word that new Word could not without a converter. And then finally, Microsoft says, well, we've got to make it so that our people can open up old files without problems, because LibreOffice can open them up. LibreOffice can even open up Works files.
Well, and they can Docs too, Google Docs.
Oh, yeah.
They're all three of them work together. You just have to figure out which thing does what and learn some new tricks to make it your own. So no, you don't need to redo them. You just save them as Word or whatever you want to, or you make them Writer. You say, I'm going to use Writer, and that's going to be it. And I don't want to think about it. I'm just going to open them up, and I'm going to teach myself how to use Writer, and boom, I'm going to change over. Easy peasy, as the kids say. Does my Windows change to Linux to incorporate what I have to Linux? Can you demo front change? I can't, a font change. Oh. Well, I just put that R in there.
That's fine.
So put that down. You have to show us how to do that.
To do what?
I know it's Writer. Can you demo how to change a font?
Can you change a font in Word?
No, in Writer.
No, I'm asking the question.
Oh, never mind. Of course you can. I do that all the time.
Right. I'm just saying that's not Linux, that's software, but I'm not avoiding it. But yes, easy. It's just like in Word. You select the font you want and use it. So that's not a big problem. Here's a question that I don't know if you got, but it's a good question because someone asked me, is a Mac or Windows better for Linux? The biggest answer would be, what's the processor? Our club refurbishes computers, and we have been refurbishing a lot of Mac computers into Linux computers. But I don't do it, but what the person that does says sometimes it's a matter of the processor. If it's, one of the Microsoft's, Apple's very proprietary type processor, but we do that, and it doesn't matter. It's the computer. If it can't run Apple anymore and it can't run Windows anymore, it probably can still run Linux. So if you like that device and it's still working well, give it a try.
Oh, somebody gave us a Copilot answer.
That's not a Linux thing.
Oh, I know. Well, that's what came up when they searched for a question.
That's good.
Yeah, using the context menu, right click on the desktop, blah, blah, blah. Can I load Linux on an old Chromebook PC?
The surprise is you've been using Linux. Chrome OS is a version of Linux. So the answer is yes. You have to go, if I'm correct, into developer mode, and then you can install it. So we have a number of people. We had a workshop on that where we had somebody who was installing Linux on an old Chromebook that wouldn't upgrade anymore.
What about using old monitors on a desktop with a Linux? I have a 19-inch monitor, which works well with Windows on, and another one on Linux, but it shrinks to 15-inch screen with empty spaces on the sides.
That would be probably a setting in your display manager. under your settings that it's not being the right resolution or whatever. That would be something you'd look at that, go into display. I know you have to deal with that if you're going through a different monitor. I have my laptop and my desktop connected to the same big screen monitor, and sometimes when I hook up to the laptop, I have to make some changes because it's a bigger screen than my 17-inch thing. So that I would have to say you'd have to go into display settings and look to make sure that it's right. Because that to me, it just sounds like it's not set for the right.
Well, that's like when they made we're starting to make the bigger monitors, and you had two settings in PowerPoint where
4x3.
the old one was you could see the border around it, and then all of a sudden, whoopee, we got a choice where it could be, you could make it to fill the whole entire page.
Yeah, and that's the 4x3 versus the 16.
Yeah, or the hoo-ha.
Yeah.
Okay, I would recommend, this person says, Zorin for new users from Windows.
Whole nother topic.
Yep.
Because there is a problem. There is a problem with Zorin.
I have heard that, and not from
say
you.
that. It's a political financial thing.
Oh God, give me a break. Will anything be lost in the translation, so to speak, when copying files from one file system to another? I am not copying files. I am just opening up a document that I want to continue revising, and it's in Word. It's seamless. You don't even have to think about it. Right. Or you decided to bite the bullet and you're going to go cold turkey and you're going to start using Writer. And you just open, and I know this is software, but you just open it up and you start using it.
Yeah. When you copy files, the files are files. So if you copy all of your photos from Windows to Linux, it's going to open up in the photo program that you're going to use on Linux, which there's a ton of choices. Files are files. And so software files are made by a program and read by a program. And they're so universal that no, there's not going to be any loss in that kind of a file. Document files, movie files, thing. You know, if it's a very common file, it'll switch over. Okay, couple more so we can move on.
Don't ask me any more questions, okay? So we can go on. Save them for the next time. I've got 5 new questions, and then we'll switch over to the fun stuff.
We'll see if you say that afterwards.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I think that answers your question, Steve. I think I got that. And of course, you can sync all your Linux stuff with everything else that you've done. And Bill James has decided to go over to Linux all the way. And he's our Mr. Windows guy who syncs everything but his teeth. And will that work perfectly for him? And life will just go on with syncing everything? And it's not going to make any difference that they used to be Word, but now they're Writer?
He syncs files to the cloud, so they're in one location, and he opens them up wherever he wants with whatever he wants.
So it's the same old, same old.
To me, it is.
Okay. Oh, you just answered the next question. Will it run from the USB drive?
That's what you're creating.
Okay.
You know, I'm having you create a live USB so that you can test out Linux on your machine to see how well it works. And next question that I have that's supposed to have gone to you, I have to follow up, is that when you're on the live USB, you have access to all of your files on your hard drive in Windows. Linux is the program that a lot of computer repair people use to access files that people can't get to with Windows, because Linux can bypass the Windows password of a user and copy all of your pictures. You know, when your hard drive goes bad, but your files are all there, Windows can't open it. Linux can get in, copy all of your precious files, and save them to an external hard drive. So yes, live CD will access all of your files, and same thing when I talk about something else in the next part.
A comment about LibreOffice versus Excel interoperability. Oh boy, that was from a
not a Linux question.
Okay.
That's a software.
I was proud of myself. I could say that.
Yep, you were.
John, how much RAM are you using?
I on my one computer, I'm big hogger. Right? I've got do I have 32 on one, 16? The laptop that I'm presenting from is, I think, an 8. My old laptop was a 4.
How sad.
But it runs.
I know.
Runs just as good.
Hey, let me see. I tried Display Manager and it gave several options, none of which fills the screen without getting too big for the monitor. So you can't see the size of the screen, especially when the OK or continue buttons are not visible.
Yeah, you're just too large. That happens with Windows too. Your screen's too big. The other day with Judy, we were working and she couldn't see some buttons because it's too big. That's something that's it's an individual problem that has to be worked out, and it could be part of the monitor. Settings in the monitor might have to be adjusted. That's a technical hardware, not really a Linux thing that we're doing. Operating system.
Got it. Okay. Do you need to take a little break and not hear my voice anymore?
Well, I just need to stop one recording and start the new one.